All right, gang, we're going to deal with requirements modeling. Be a brief overview of this chapter. So, we'll talk about JAD and RAD, and we've talked about that in the past. We'll also talk about functional decomposition diagrams. We'll talk about UML, or Unified Modeling Language, and the diagrams associated with them. We'll talk about system requirements, outputs, inputs, processes, performance, and controls. And we'll talk about scalability, different fact-finding techniques, about how to interview, document things, observe, questionnaires, sampling, and surveys. Talk about TCO, the total cost of ownership for a project, and how to do a successful interview. So, at this point, we have to be able to understand the proposed project. So we need to be able to, if we can understand it, let's model it. Remember we talked about making a picture, painting a picture. We need to paint a picture of what this thing's going to look like. So we need to model what the system will look like. Now, we laid it out in a Gantt chart, and we saw the PERT chart, but we need to get a model of the data and the process. So we've got the requirements modeling, we've got data and process modeling, we've got object modeling, and it's tough to get it all laid out. And it's not one size fits all kind of thing. There's not one way to do it. We've got different ways to go through and do what we're doing. We'll talk about RAD and JAD. We'll skip through that. Okay. All right. Let's get into modeling. So, let's start out with functional decomposition diagrams. It's a top-down representation of a function or a process. So think about that. Functional means it's an action, doing something, things happening. So if we go look at this, here's functional, an FDD, functional decomposition diagram. It shows a library system, 5 levels of functionality. So this is functionality. It's not people. It's what's happening at different levels of a system. Okay. So you've got the library management system, breaks down into these 5 systems or functionalities. The library operations, there's operations budgeting, book management, and personnel management. Book management, what's made up of that? Add, remove books, so each one has its own functionality. We've modeled it so that we can see how this whole thing lays out. Now there's business process modeling, or BPM, represents one or more business processes. Now it could be process order, prepare billing, create shipping data. And these are the processes of what the organization does in its smallest components. Now if we look at it this way, we've got data flow diagrams. Now these are very important because we need to understand as an analyst where the data comes from and where it goes, who's using it, and what form is it in. Okay? This is critical to the success of what we're doing, vital to our endeavor. So we can use case diagrams, sequence diagrams, so that we see the sequencing of how things happen and how we output them. We could output or display these things in a manner of different ways. Now, scalability is a system's ability to be able to handle increased business volume and transactions in the future. Let's say that you open up a restaurant and it was far more successful than you planned. Yep, we're going to need more pots, pans, plates, everything. We need more people working here. Can we fit more chairs in? What can we do to efficiently handle this increase in business? So the total cost of ownership. Now it's important if the development team is evaluating several alternatives, because it's not just a matter of this is what this cost. There's an impact beyond the actual cost. There's indirect costs that we may not think about. Now, cost estimates tend to underestimate indirect costs, and systems analysts should try to identify those indirect costs and include them into the TCO estimates so that we know if we have to choose between three projects, which one's the correct one cost-wise. Right, we've talked about fact-finding. Now this fact-finding, we've got an individual, usually, an individual has submitted this request. And now let's say at this point, we have approved the request. We said, yeah, I shouldn't say we've approved it. We've recommended it for approval. It looks good. It looks like, yeah, this seems feasible. That's aligned with what you guys want to do. And they came back and they said, yes, this is what we want to do. Now, we have to, all along the way, ask questions. Anybody that's involved in this system or will be involved in this system, we need to interview them and get their perception on it. Now, all too often, the individual that submitted the request to us has nothing to do with the system on a day-to-day basis. Nothing. They don't understand, in many cases, how it works, how it will work. It's been proposed to them, and then they submitted it to us. Now, some cases, they may be the person that submitted the request, and they may not be the decision maker. So we need to talk to the decision maker, person made the request, the person that's going to deal with the system. Get everybody's perception on this. How is it possible to get too many interviews, collect too much data? Not when it comes to this. The more information we have, more data we collect, the more reliable our decisions will be. So we need who, what, where, when, how, and why. How's it done? Who's doing it? What's done? Why is it done? Why should it be done? And we need to determine what should, who should, where should, when should. All right. Okay. We have to determine who we're going to interview, to understand the objectives for the interview, come up with some questions, get ready for the interview, conduct the interview, document the interview, and then go back and evaluate how did it go. Look at the results. What do we gain from it? We're not limited to one interview. We can go back and have another one with the same individual if need be. We don't ask everybody the same questions. They may be unique to the individual because that individual may have more insight into the system than others would. So it's tough to know who to interview. We don't just interview upper management, and we don't just interview the line items. So it's tough to know who and how. And when it comes to interviewing them, is it face-to-face? Is it a survey? How are we going to gain that information from them? Is it going to be very formal, informal, or is it a combination of the two? We need to have the objectives for the interview and develop the specific questions. And we said prepared for it, document, evaluate it. Some go bad, some don't. Okay. Now, when it comes to surveys and questionnaires, what if we don't have time to go sit down at a table with everybody and have interviews with them? We could do surveys and questionnaires. As a student, you're requested to fill out a survey at the end of every course. I hate doing it, don't you? How many times when you call up, you're having a problem with, let's say, your cable? Could be anything. Could be your mobile phone you're having a problem with. And you call up to get some help. Early into the phone call, they ask you, Would you be willing to complete a brief survey or questionnaire at the end of this call? All you're thinking about at that point is, I don't want to be on this phone right now. I don't care about your questionnaire. I just want to resolve the issue at hand. So when it comes to questionnaires and surveys, this is a very challenging way to gain information because it's hard to motivate somebody to fill this out and be thorough, be effective, and be honest. They may just fill it out because they're angry and they want to vent. So we have to understand the weight and how to do these things. If we compel them to fill out the questionnaire, is there any assurance that it's going to be reliable? So, there. I already said we're documenting everything as much as we can. Okay. So, we're in the systems analysis phase, and here we're analyzing, getting opinions, collecting data to understand the proposed project and ensure that it will support the business requirements and build a foundation for the systems design phase that's coming up next. We've got the fact-finding process could include interviews, documentation, observations, questionnaires, sampling, and research. So this phase, we're in the second phase now. A lot of homework being done in this phase. I don't mean class homework. I mean, as a job, there's a lot of research taking place here. Okay? So we'll see you in the next